Good morning, everyone. Phew, a little rusty this morning. It's our first coffee chat of the year. We are day 10 of school, so we're still ironing out all the kinks and stuff, and same with getting ready for our coffee chat. So want to welcome everyone that joined us. My team is assembled here in the boardroom. Hopefully you can see us all there. We have some information we'd like to share today. We'll kind of go through that. I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully you can all see this.
To the bottom window.
Yeah.
That's good.
Okay. Look at us. We're like a well-oiled machine here. So just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about advance.
Use the buttons to one.
Well, maybe it's a well-oiled machine.
You click the ones on the side, maybe.
There you go. What's that bottom?
There you go.
All right. Just a reminder, we have 3 more coffee chats scheduled in October, and then another one in February, and then another one in April. We're trying to find for October, we're trying to find a location that will allow us to do this in person. We've got some feelers out, so we'll try to do October's and April's in person. February will be virtual, just like this one. So today we're going to talk a little bit about some of our focus areas as a corporation this year, the legislative impact on the school corporation. Then that kind of just naturally leads into our corporation funding, how we're funded as a school corporation. Look at our enrollment numbers, and then answer some questions at the end if we have some time. So we'll get started on our focus areas. So I shared with the teachers earlier this year, these are kind of our focus areas for the 25-26 school year. We spent most of the spring semester working on a strategic plan. We're going to roll that out to the school board at our next school board meeting on August 21st. And so this will be a big focus for us. The new staff schedule, the PLC and the professional development days, working on that. New evaluation system for both our administrators and our teachers. We worked really hard on improving both of those tools. We're going to look at the 26-27 student schedules, and that's really in the secondary area, both the high school and the middle school. We just want to ensure that we're meeting the needs of our students today, and reaching out working with our staff to try to find the optimum schools or the student schedule for the school year. But that won't be until the 26-27 school year, but we're working on that now because we know we have to have that done before Christmas. If we're going to make any changes, it needs to be done before Christmas, because right after the holiday break, we start scheduling in the secondary areas. And then we're also going to focus on creating an MTSS framework. We really don't have an official framework. It's multi-tiered systems of support for all of our students. We've really just started working on that, and we're going to kind of formalize that. And so every school and every building and every teacher has that framework that we'll use. And then attendance is going to be a big focus, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, what some of the legislative changes that came about with attendance. That's been really a focus of ours really since COVID. We're slowly creeping back up to our pre-COVID numbers, but we're still trying to emphasize the importance of having our students here at school every single day. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the new legislative changes for this school year. Most of them came into effect on July 1st. So not that school's not a big focus of the legislative session, but this year there were 1,229 bills introduced to the General Assembly. 174 of those bills were being tracked by the Indiana School Boards Association. That means 14.15% of all bills introduced were related to K-12 schools, governance of the schools or children. So those are it really shows you how much attention is given to education. So at the end of the session, there were 244 new laws enacted, 43 new education or K-12 education policy, school or local governance or child-related laws. And so adding 43 enrolled acts and 308 new laws in the last 8 years affecting K-12, that means we've averaged about 38.5 new laws per year, all geared towards education. Not all of them have been fixing education, by the way, they're just geared towards education. So one of the big ones that we want to talk about today, or I'll talk about today, is the law, Senate Enrolled Act 482, related to absenteeism and student discipline. It defines what chronically absent is, requires the DOE to come up with a list of best practices to reduce student discipline. And like I said, we've been working on that for since we've returned from COVID. The DOE is supposed to study and prepare a report and send that back to the legislators. Still, the thing that's important here is that deciding what's excused and unexcused is a local decision. Each individual school corporation gets to determine what is an excused and unexcused absence. The big change here that you can see in the check mark, the first or the second check mark right in the middle, requires a public school to hold an attendance conference not later than 10 instructional days. It used to be 5 instructional days after the student's 5th absence. Well, last year, this law was in place for just K-6, and the corporation did 724 attendance meetings or attendance conferences with parents because we had that many students over their 5th absence. This year, the law applies to K-12, so we're trying to gear up, trying to get that message out that attendance is important. This takes a lot of time of our social workers, our counselors, our deans, and assistant principals to have these conferences. So we were going to really try to emphasize student attendance. The other big change is it prohibits us from expelling or suspending a student solely based on whether they're chronically absent or habitually truant. And so I feel like as a school corporation, that's kind of a dual-edged sword for us because schools now get our letter grade that's assigned to each of our schools is based on attendance. So we don't want to lose kids, but when kids start refusing to come to school and they can't be suspended or expelled for that, then that impacts the school grade because of the attendance factor in our the letter grade. So we need to just make that really important to our parents. Each of our buildings are working hard on it. Like I said, they've all been working hard on it for the last couple of years, and our numbers are approaching to where we were before COVID, but we still have, like I said, we had 724 kids that missed more than 5 days last year. So we're going to keep plugging away at that. So this is where I'm really going to turn most of this over to my associate superintendent, Dr. Taylor, because he's also our CFO, but he'll talk a little bit about the finances and the changes at the state level and how they impact us here at Center Grove. So Dr. Taylor.
Thanks, Dr. Just wanted to share, so at the highest level, what the state did this year through some of that legislation. They operate on a biennium budget, so this was the first year of two in which this budget will apply. And they truly gave a 2% increase in both years to school corporations throughout the state. In addition to that, they rolled in something they'd been funding separate, which were curricular materials. And you can see it's actually 160 million in funding there. Center Grove spends a lot in this area. We've reported this a couple times during the open school board meetings at the end of the school year, typically in the May timeline, if you want to learn more about this topic. But we actually spend about double what the state gives us. And that's something we're working on internally to find some improvements and some cost savings there. This was a great law to allow for a truly free and fair education to our families. So we are supportive of parents not paying curriculum materials. However, with that lack of funding amount, it's becoming increasingly more difficult to buy those materials out of that amount of money. And then the other thing on this chart or this slide that I'll mention at the very bottom there, we really do rely on a lot of these special programs. Special education, English language learners, and then that's CTE is more like vocational school funding or trade school funding. That was actually reduced. Typically, we see larger increases in those areas. In prior budgets, those have increased by 5 or 10%. And that to actually go down will be a pretty big impact on us because we are a very large comprehensive school corporation. We have a lot of kids that their education is funded from those grants. So that's something we had to make up for out of that 2% increase up above. When we look at the other major bill, I'll continue just a little bit on. So no, that's fine. That's great. Also in the budget bill, they made a pretty significant change. It's going to impact every one of our teachers and a lot of our staff, really. We've had this teacher appreciation grant for a number of years now. It's a very nice amount of money that the state gives us for teacher performance. And we pass that right along to our teachers. So we take every penny that the state gives us. We make sure our teachers get that in salary. And then we increase that amount and pay the benefit cost associated above and beyond that. We also extend that to our other employee groups, including all of our support staff, our custodian, maintenance, and transportation department, our bus drivers. They've really changed that. And now it's going to be a competitive grant. It's only going to go to the top 20%. And there's not enough money to go to 20% of the teachers in our state. And so we know not all schools will get this. We don't have the rules from the state of how this will change. We expect those this month. But what we're hearing from our peers is some are not even going to apply for this because they don't want to bring this kind of negativity into their corporation. We are discussing whether or not that's Center Grove's feeling or whether or not we want to allow this 20% to go to other school corporations, because if we don't submit any names, then no one gets it. So we're going to be working on that this school year. It's a significant change. It's a disappointing change. And it's something that really will cause our employees to feel a difference. We tried to communicate that with them. We communicated as early, I think, as May last year when we got word about this, just to prep them for this change. Sorry, I skipped that. So the other major bill, and usually we just get the budget bill is our biggest change financially, but this year, as you've probably seen and heard in the news, the governor had really charged the General Assembly to make some changes to local property taxes. And boy, did they make some changes. Matter of fact, they made so many changes that some of the things actually aren't going to work out the way they intended. And they're going to have to make some tweaks when they rejoin for their short session this winter. But the biggest thing is a change into the standard homestead deduction. And I've got some charts as we move forward that are going to go into that. But the goal of that was to set aside some value of homes and businesses in our corporation and all corporations so that they weren't taxed at that high of a level. And I'm going to show you how that's changed. They also eliminated something called local income taxes. That could be shared to school corporations. That's something that in Johnson County is very important to all of our school corporations. Clark Pleasant, Greenwood, Indian Creek, they all receive this money. That will go away in 2028 unless they make a change. And for Center Grove, that number is really 1.4 million. And with some supplemental contributions, it's been as high as 1.7 and 8 million in prior years. So that's something that we are prepping for, as that is expected to hit in 2028 without any significant changes. You can see there's the impact on school corporations over the next 3 years of this budget and the year after it. they're expecting schools to have a net reduction of 740 million. And the terms downtown were less of more, or a decrease to the increase. They weren't going to let us grow our revenue as fast. But what we're actually seeing play out is that it's really less of less, and it's an increase of a decrease. They're actually going to take money away from not just school corporations, but cities, towns, townships, fire departments. It's going to be very difficult for the next couple of years to just have the revenue that we had this current year. And so you're going to see some changes in the way all of our taxing units in this area tax property. It is a true decrease. So as we look then at what those two laws do locally, and we kind of hone in a little more, just want to remind everyone, we've used this chart just about every year. This is a chart of it's 290 public school corporations in the state of Indiana. Center Grove ranks 266th in funding on that list. You'll see this as the red bar to the far right. These are sorted by the amount of money you get per student. So schools to the far left would be schools with a higher poverty level. And over to the right, where we are, would be a lower poverty level, typically more of a suburban school corporation. And so you'll see where we fall. We're 266 out of 290. As we look at local property tax dollars, kind of what that Senate Bill 1 really plays into, looking here at the county level, we always like to show our tax rate. We've tried to keep our tax rate as low as possible and to try to keep it as flat as possible over really the past 15 to 16 years. You'll see Center Grove's tax rate's a little over $1.06, and that's per $100 of value on your home. We are surpassed by Clark, Pleasant, Franklin, and Edinburgh in their tax rates, not only in their base tax rate, which you see in the gray bar, but those three school corporations have also successfully passed an operating referendum. So they get all their local property tax dollars, plus their community members said yes on a ballot in an election period to provide more revenue to the school corporation. And so you can see how they then far surpass us even in their tax rate on their property. So where do we spend both the money that we get in the budget bill and then in our tax revenue? Well, we took a look at, we have two funds, our education fund and our operations fund. And we looked at all of the costs in those two funds, and 85% or 85 cents of every dollar goes to our staff salaries and benefits. And the large majority of that goes to our teachers. They represent 53% of that 85, so they're well over half. Support staff's about 24%, and the administration's 8% of that total cost. So that doesn't leave much room for everything else. You'll see then our next biggest sliver is every 11 cents on the dollar goes to our utilities or our supply costs. So things to keep our buildings operating and functioning. And then the last little sliver is a bunch of miscellaneous everything else. Biggest thing in here is liability insurance. As you probably know, the homeowner, that continues to increase. Well, for a large corporation with a lot of facilities like ours has really increased a lot over the past few years. And so it's really hard to make adjustments. When we're spending 85 cents of every dollar on staffing cost, there's just not a lot of room to reduce spending out of those other two, really 15% in total amounts. So I want to go a little more into what Senate Bill did, and this is a nice visual. We work with a company called Policy Analytics. They provide a lot of information to the General Assembly, but they also then help school corporations and other government entities process that new information and really kind of share it out with the community. So this is a great chart that kind of shows what we had in the past were these standard deductions on our homes. And the standard deduction for 2025, you received about $48,000 off your home value, or 60%. And what that means is that part was set aside and not taxed. You just paid tax on the other portion of your home. And you'll see, so the plan with Senate Bill 1 is to phase that down from 48,000 all the way down to zero. And in turn, to increase what they call a supplemental deduction. And you'll see the percentage for it was 37.5%. Or a little over a third of your home value that you wouldn't pay tax on. Well, that's going to increase all the way up to over 2/3 of the value. And there's a great visual there of what a home looks like when you take away 2/3 of the value and what you get taxed on. And so by 2031, we actually are going to tax on only 1/3 of a home value, whereas currently we would tax at 2/3 of the home value. And what really compounds that is that number at the very top of this slide. In Center Grove area proper here where we provide an education, 81% of all of our property is residential. So this is a pretty big hit for the corporation. That's different if you were to look at Greenwood, Clark Pleasant, even Franklin, where there's a little more of a balance between residential, industrial, commercial property. So just looking at specifically, what happens then? So with local property taxes, that funds our operations fund. So that's our custodial staff, our bus drivers, our maintenance and grounds crews. It also funds our debt service, which is basically like our mortgage. When we want to build something or improve something, we sell bonds and we pay those back over years, just like you would a mortgage and a loan. So that lowering of the future assessed values is really going to impact us. In order for us to just get the same amount of money that we got in 2025, we're going to have to increase our tax rate. There's no way around that. And you're going to hear that probably from the fire department and from the town of Bargersville and Greenwood and from the township trustee. All of these taxing units are going to try to at least get what they got in 2025. Because as you all know, our prices and costs are not going down. And so to maintain and to offset the inflationary costs, we're going to have to make sure we at least have as much money as we had this year. It is going to limit our ability to do future projects, as we have to now start spending more of this money on operational needs and supplies. It's going to be less money for us to improve our facilities and maintain them or grow them. Because of this, if all of these taxing units raise their tax rates, we will have an issue with tax caps. And we already have a little bit of an issue. This is the limit of how much you can pay as a homeowner. And for a homeowner, it's going to be 1% of that third of your property that you'd be limited, or the total value of your property that you'd be limited on. And you're going to see with these other groups increase, we're going to kind of play this game about who can get the most revenue from the cap loss, or who can have the least cap loss total. It's not the way the law intended to operate, but it is how it's going to operate as we move forward. And I'm not just saying that for Center Grove. You're going to hear this statewide. And then in addition to all this, after all this work, there's still, the governor and some others were still not satisfied with this, and they asked for an additional credit. And so there's now a new post-tax cap credit, and it's the higher of 10% of your home or $300. And that's really going to impact our debt service and operations fund. It doesn't protect our debt service fund, which is a really scary thing. So we're going to have to make sure we can make our mortgage payments, just like you want to make sure you could at home. And so we're planning for that. We have a great plan in place for it, but wanted you to be aware. They made some changes to what's called personal property taxes. Not a big deal for Center Grove. We have some small like dental offices and businesses that have some property, but not a lot. But then in 2028, as I mentioned, at least 1.5 million will feel that loss of that income tax. So the chart below kind of visually shows how this plays out. As I talked about earlier, that these taxing units are going to have to increase their rate. Well, here's why. Currently in Center Grove, we have about 4.3, it's really billion, but it plays out as 4.3 thousand million, or 4,300 million. At our tax rate of $1.06, you'll see in 2025, we generated a little over $45 million. And that paid for our operations fund, those people's salaries and our supplies and our utility bills, but it also paid for our mortgage and our debt service fund. Well, let's just assume, like in past years, the value's gone up because we're a growing community. We've got new houses going in. We have some new businesses going in. We expected our assessed value to grow. And if it would grow, we could actually lower our tax rate to $1.01 and still generate the same amount of money that we got in 2025. And that honestly is what we would have done if we'd have seen that growth. The other option we could have had is we see that growth and we still see that we have increasing costs. We could have kept our tax rate the same at $1.06. Well, if we would have grown and kept our rate the same, you see, we would have netted a little over 47 million in all of our funds that we needed. But here's what really happened with Senate Bill 1 is they took that 43 million and said, we're going to set aside a lot of the value that you're imposing your tax on. 2/3, as a matter of fact, over the next 6 years. And so our assessed value is actually projected to go down possibly by 300, it'd be 300 million. And so what that's going to cause us to do is increase our tax rate to offset that. And if it truly goes down by that amount, you can kind of see how our tax rate would increase. And that doesn't give us $1 of new money. It just gets us back to the same amount of money we had in 2025. And so that's the real impact of this law. You're going to see and hear this a lot as towns and communities are working through their budgets in the upcoming months. But this is a good visual we wanted you to have to kind of explain that. So I know I shared a lot, but there is a great silver lining to this dark cloud. One thing, we are a growing community, so if our assessed value can continue to grow, we can offset some of these reductions. And I'm really hopeful, and we are expecting a little bit of growth to offset some of that, to not make this as bad as it will be on some schools. There will be some rural schools and some small schools that are really going to struggle to survive with these new rules. They are going to lose a lot of revenue that they cannot make up because their communities are not growing. We are fortunate that we are. We also have done a great job of building our classroom capacity up over the past decade. We now have classrooms available at all three levels, elementary, middle, and secondary. We can grow students without growing our buildings. We might tweak them, renovate them, reuse some of the internal square footage, but we won't have to add for a little while. And that helps us spread out the impact of this. And it helps us limit our spending on that mortgage and that debt service. We've been preparing for this. We heard there were study committees. We knew there were some changes coming. And so we have some cash balance to help spread this out over a couple of years. We can take some of these hits each year instead of taking one big hit here in 2026 as we build the budget for that. We also, again, have made some reductions in our administrative staff and our secretarial costs, trying to keep as much money as we can in the classroom. And it's been some significant reductions. We looked at our structure from 2 years ago and compared it to start this year. Excuse me. And we've reduced an assistant superintendent, a coordinator of connected learning, a department secretary in the teaching and learning department. And through those reductions, we're also then able to reorganize our student services, our business office, and our human resources department, all to be more efficient and to use our people to their max efficiency and to ultimately lower the cost. That savings alone allowed us to absorb. We also, on top of all that stuff I shared earlier, we also got notified of another state mandated change where our contribution to the state for teacher retirement funds, so we pay this for every teacher in our corporation, it's going to go up by 0.6%. And that's going to cost us $220,000 starting in 2026. We don't get a say in that. The board met, they voted on it. They said, this is what we need from you. And so, not our board, but the turf board voted on it. And so we had to come up with that money. The nice thing is through those savings, we were able to offset some of that. And then the biggest thing that's really helping us, I showed you the slivers earlier, and that 11% sliver included our spending on utilities. Well, we've really tried to tackle that with our solar and our geothermal projects over the past really year and a half to bring down our utility cost. And just the work in 2024 that we completed, we estimate will save us $500,000 by 2026. And so typically in the budget, we would have increased on average by about $150,000 our utility costs. As you know, your utility bills also go up each year. We were actually able to decrease it, and that made $500,000 available in existing expense that we can now apply to some other expense, which is going to help us in the salary and benefits area. We're continuing that work. You probably see some more solar going up. They're on the roofs of most buildings, so you may not visually see them, but you would see a larger array down by Maple Grove if you ever wanted to take a look at it. But as those are completed this year, we're anticipating an additional $500,000 savings as we build the 2027 budget. And we're already starting to talk about, can we do something with the rest of the buildings? Can we become more efficient and lower our utility costs? That's going to help us have more money available for that 85% expense of salaries and benefits.
One of the advantages of the energy savings project is that we are going to be able to make Maple Grove Elementary the first net zero elementary school in Indiana, which means that we can, the utilities don't cost us anything. And so that's a really big deal for us. While it was one of our newer schools, it was one of our most expensive schools to heat and cool. And by doing the geothermal, replacing the HVAC and adding the solar panels, now we can say that will be a net zero building. So it shouldn't cost, utility-wise, it shouldn't cost us anything at all.
Great point. Thanks, Michael. So where do we go from here? So we know what's coming in 2026. We're working on that. But if we prepare and start talking about how do we take and absorb these blows in the upcoming really 5 years, we're going to have to, I mentioned this earlier, we're going to have to reduce our spending on curricular materials. It's just something we have to do. The state provides us with about 1.5 million. We spend about 3.6. Now that includes like the student's iPad or Chromebook, the technology cost, but it also includes a lot of print material that our students have. And so that's something we're really got to focus on. And that money is in our ed fund and could directly go to salaries and benefits if we can reduce it. And so we need to do that. There are also some areas where we may have to look at, some schools are starting to do this, where they're actually applying some supply cost fees back to parents. We're trying to put this off, but it's becoming harder and harder as you see these changes coming at us. These would be things that you would typically, as the student would take home with them at the end of the year. Think about like art kits, music kits, supplies. It could be some tangible supplies that they use during the school year, but then bring home. So it's something we're looking at. We've yet to make a decision on what that will actually be, but it's something we have to explore at this point. There was a reduction in summer school funding, so that's going to really impact us and our ability to offer some elective summer school courses next year. We may have to charge some nominal fees for those courses. We'll still do the courses that we need to do to make sure students are getting the growth and the catch up that they need during the summer. But some of those extra go above and beyond electives are going to have to be treated a little differently. We need to continue our enrollment growth, and we have some steady growth right now. It's not like what we've had over the past few years, but it does need to increase. If we were declining enrollment on top of all of this, we'd have a very different conversation today. And then ultimately, if all of these hits don't get improved, changed, or fixed, or our community can't outgrow all of these impacts with their valuation, we're going to have to look at an operating referendum very possibly in 2028. And that would directly go to those salary and benefits for our teachers and some support staff to make sure that we don't have to make reductions in those areas. Like I said earlier, it's 85 cents of every dollar. As we reduce utilities, it's going to be even more percent of every dollar. To maintain that and to remain competitive in this area, you saw 3 other schools in our county have passed one of these operating referendums. It's something we're really going to have to look at and have to explore to make sure that we can keep providing the excellent education experience we provide. So just wanted to hit real quick, and these will go fast. They're mainly visual charts, but just give you a quick update on enrollment. As I said, we're having some steady growth. You'll see what's different on this slide is it kind of plateaus off, and I'm going to explain why it's doing that here in the upcoming years. And that's not an awful thing. Like I said earlier, we have capacity. We want to keep this going up a little bit, but we don't need it to go straight up. It's okay. We don't need to be Hamilton, Southeastern Fishers, where we're opening the school every year. But some good steady growth really allows us to maintain our programs and our compensation levels. And so this year, currently, we're projecting about 9,632 students, and that will continue to grow over the next few years. And let's talk a little bit about that plateau. We have that on an upcoming slide, I believe, Dr. Long. So what we are seeing in our community, and this is actually being seen statewide, is a slowing of elementary student growth. And you'll see on this chart, I have 3 different lines. The blue line at the top is our elementary student population. And you'll see it kind of peaked there in 2022, and it's really kind of flatlined, even went down a little bit in the past few years. It's decreased. However, for Center Grove, what's been great is our next 2 lines, our high school line there in green. The high school continues to grow. They're projected to be about 3,059 students. 30,000 would be tough to accommodate.
Yeah.
And then our middle schools also are continuing to grow at 2,390 right now. So the growth in our secondary schools has offset that flat line or even declining at times enrollment. And at the bottom, you can see we've kind of put out there, what are the capacity of the schools we have? This includes a little bit of usage of portables, but not too much. But you can see we could accommodate another 700 elementary students, another really 700 middle school students, and about 800 high school students if we filled and used every single classroom we have. Now, those rooms are being used. They're being used by smaller programs right now. We don't have a lot of empty classrooms in our buildings, but we would have to tighten and move those special programs to other areas to use those as classrooms. So as I mentioned, this isn't just a Center Grove issue. This is population data from the 2020 census. I know we're 5 years after that, so you kind of have to move all these bars over by 5 years, and we will get an update sometime in 2026 with the data from this current year. But what this shows is in Center Grove, the population really has started to slow down the growth at the elementary level. So all those kids that are in that big 15 to 19 year bar, they've graduated and moved on. They're in college or even starting careers now. And what we're seeing is that those that were aged 10 to 14 in 2020 are now in our middle school and high school, or even getting ready to move on to college. And so we're seeing replacement cohorts of kids that are smaller than the ones that are graduating. So when we get all the way down to the under 5 and the 5 to 9, the kids that are in elementary and middle school right now, you'll see those are smaller groups of students in total than what we're graduating. So our kindergarten class is coming in smaller than the senior class that's leaving. Now, what's different for Center Grove is, like I said earlier, we're getting that injection of students grades 6 through 12 who are coming to Center Grove for a larger comprehensive experience. And so we are seeing some growth to offset those smaller numbers. But in other schools statewide, they're not getting that, and they're seeing a declining enrollment. So we always like to share then some transfer data because that is kind of a hot topic, and it gets kind of misunderstood at times. So I want to be clear in this chart. I'm going to walk you through it. It's got a lot of colors, and it explains all three kind of groups of our transfer students. The green group, those are public schools that are coming into Center Grove. So our biggest one is Greenwood School Corporation. A lot of kids come over here from Greenwood for a larger comprehensive high school experience. You'll see in 2024-5, we brought in about 638 students. I got them here. Okay. Then the blue bar actually shows students that we're losing. They're choosing to go to another high school. Again, the largest school in this group is Greenwood High School, or Greenwood School Corporation. They're probably going over there for a smaller school experience. It's kind of the trade we're seeing. People also, that's easy mobility for parents. I understand that. But they're not all 529. Those kids are going all over the place in Johnson and Marion County. Some are going to Columbus and other areas. It's typically tied to parent employment or whatever it might be. But we are bringing in more public transfers than we are actually sending out. And we're not actively campaigning to bring them in. However, that has continued to grow and allowed our enrollment to grow. And what we try to do is when we get these transfers in, we try to position them, especially at the elementary level, so that they benefit our students. So we might get 4 or 5 transfers that we can put in one building and actually add a teacher. And that lowers the class size for all of our students. So it's a good thing. We really try, we look at every one of these to make sure we're not overwhelming a class or a grade level. So then there's the big red bar on there that keeps growing. And this is what you might hear as voucher schools. These are students who are taking their state revenue money and actually going to a private charter school. And this is a growing bar. And it's growing for 2 reasons. One, there are more vouchers and charter schools forming, and so there's more opportunity for kids. But 2, the state over the last really 5 years has changed the limitations on this. It used to be that you had to be really around the poverty level in income for you to qualify for a voucher. And that's grown to where now 100% of all homes in Indiana qualify for a voucher. And so they can take that money and go. So we don't know if these kids were already going to a voucher school and their home income now qualifies, or if they're truly new. We don't get that kind of data from the state, but that is the twofold reason why that bar has grown. You will still see that Center Grove in total loses more students than they bring in. We are very competitive on the public to public, but the voucher really overwhelms and sends more students out. So just want to be clear, we don't bring in more students than we lose. And if we ever got to that point, we'd probably rethink the way we're bringing in transfers.
We have in the past, we've not allowed out of district transfers to certain elementary schools or even to certain grade levels. We monitor it that closely so that we don't extend a grade level or a building. And I think in the past, Dr. Taylor, we've not allowed transfers to Middle School Central, or we held off at maybe Pleasant Grove before too. So we do monitor that and make sure that our out of district people don't overextend our current schools.
So then just wanted to give you a quick update on some class sizes. We hear about class sizes a lot. Honestly, with our funding, we're not able to be as competitive in class sizes as we would like. If you're a school corporation with that additional operating referendum and you can hire more teachers, you can lower your class sizes. It's just really what we're seeing. And when we compare ourselves to those schools with and without a referendum, that's really the difference we're seeing. So we've adopted some ranges in which we do look to add or reduce teachers. And this is at the elementary level. It's by grade level. And you'll see that when we get below 23 kindergarten students, we start to look at, is there an opportunity there to make a reduction in class sections but not exceeding then the number 26, which is our kind of our funding high range. That's when we take a look and we're like, well, should we add an instructional assistant to help out? Should we add a whole new section? What can we do here to bring that class size number down? This is not a perfect science. We look at this not only at a macro level, but also we will dive in and look section by section to see, are we truly fitting all of our classes in these ranges? And I'll be honest, folks, we don't, but we do for over 90% of them. Almost all of our classes will fit into these ranges, but sometimes we just get a little bubble of students in a grade level or a section, and we have to exceed that number a little bit. But it is not the norm by any means. And you can see that play out when you look at those macro averages. So on the far right, I took a snapshot. This is data from really today, yesterday, I believe. And you can see what our class size averages are at this moment. Now, what will happen in the next really 30 days or so, we'll see some kids reduce these numbers because they're in our system right now, but they're not actually in our schools. We're waiting on records requests to transfer them out. They've moved on to a different corporation. And so this will come down even a little bit more. But you'll see in total, we're under that 25 number. And that's kind of been our benchmark. We'd like to be under 25 at the elementary level. And we do keep that even lower at grades K through 3. How has that changed over the past really 5 years? Well, I wanted to show you that. Again, with that elementary enrollment number that I showed you earlier, we've kind of declined elementary enrollment a little bit. We currently yesterday set at 4,204 elementary students. Again, that number will drop by probably as many as 20 or 30 in the upcoming weeks. But we did something different this year. We haven't reduced elementary teachers. We actually increased by 1. And if you think about that, we're down, let's round off to 75 students. Well, if we're targeting about a 25 student to teacher class size at most elementary grades, it's smaller in some, that should have been a reduction of 3 sections, 3 teachers. We didn't do that. We actually added 1. And so what's happened is we've created a situation where we have the lowest class size average that we've had in the last 5 years. And it will go down a little bit more even. That was intentional. We looked at that. We had some pockets and some bubbles where we needed to provide support, and we did that. And so wanted to just be clear and share that out there that these are where our class sizes are. We would like to improve them some. We understand that we have funding limitations and cannot always. So what we really like to do is layer on additional supports and provide additional levels. We have great programs like co-teaching in our elementary schools. We have great pull-out programs to help students who need some extra help and get them back into the regular classroom. And so we provide additional layer support so that our classroom teacher does not have to manage every single one of those 25 students and every single one of their needs. They have other resources they can pull in to provide some support.
Well, we have elementary and IAs in our kindergarten classes. We have some building level assistant, instructional assistants that rotate around to the classes that need some help. So they're not left totally out to dry. We have instructional assistants that either float to those sections or are permanently assigned in the kindergarten level.
And Ms. Conrad pointed out too, that's yesterday's date, not July 12th, it's 8/12. I apologize for that typo there. All right, last really visual chart. We then wanted to kind of show you middle school. Middle school is a little different. We don't truly assign kids to that homeroom class section. Kids ebb and flow, they make elective decisions. So what we like to look at is those core teachers, math, English language arts, science and social studies. And then we'll work in the world language because they sometimes sub in for a core block of instruction and the way our schedules are built. But we don't include gym, we don't include music choir or art, those types of classes. Those numbers do fluctuate a lot based off student choice. But so you can currently see this is also data from yesterday, and it's our student population, both middle school central and middle school north. And then we look at the number of core teachers we have on those teams. And you'll see that the average class sizes there run an average of about 31 to 30 in that area. And the reason why that happens is that our teachers at the middle school level have a prep period for themselves to prepare to teach, but then they also have a team period of time where they meet with their team of teachers to work on student improvement, just a bunch of different things for students to really promote them in that team situation. I'm not saying it very well, but to really study and provide additional supports for students on those teams. So what we look at when we staff the middle schools is, well, if we didn't have that team prep, if we found another time for that team to meet and really discuss and plan for those students, what would that look like? And that's kind of how we have to staff the middle schools. And so you'll see when we actually then assume that every teacher was teaching 6 instead of 5 periods a day, what those class sizes would be like. And here's where they fall more in line with that 27 average, which is really kind of our target for the middle school level. Now, we have a lot of other things that happen at the middle school. We have honors classes that students take, and they track through those honors classes. And there's only so many sections of those. That creates imbalances. And so while I'm giving you a high level average, we fully understand there will be some classes of well above 30 and some at the low 20s to make these averages work out. And a lot of that is because of that really structured schedule that we created where kids can only go get this class this period of the day. And those kids typically will track most of the rest of their day together. And so that does create some imbalances. We're looking at these things, as Dr. Long mentioned, we've talked about student schedule. We see this as an area of improvement for us. And it's something we are having our middle school folks work on this year, and our high school folks are looking at class size as well. I don't have a high school class size chart for you. They're all over the board, as few as 1 and as many as 180, depending on the class. But the average there typically falls in line somewhere with that middle school or elementary when we look at the core. But kids get a lot of choice. Kids can do virtual, kids can do global campus. They get a lot of options there, and it's just very tough to look at a holistic class size. But we do monitor those at the department level with their building administration. I think that's all the content I had to share. Dr. Long, thanks a lot.
Are you tired yet?
I appreciate people's time and listening to
Yes.
this. I know it can be difficult sometimes to go through, so.
They can put the questions in the Q&A button, which should be at the bottom of your screen. We did have one question come in asking about energy savings and the high school keeping lights on all the time. So you want to talk about that?
Did Dr. Long submit that question? No, it is something we're working on, folks. One thing that's really happened that's been unique, we've had like 3 power outages this past summer. And so when that happens, some of our light schedules are not responding the way they should afterward. And we were working on fixing that problem for sure. We do try to dim the lights to the extent we can. However, we do have to keep the parking lights on so that our cameras can pick up safety footage for us. And to be honest, we operate almost 24/7 sometimes. And so while you might not think that parking lot's in work, we have second and third shift staff that are coming or leaving work and need that. But we are working on improvements wherever we can there. The good thing is they are LED lights. They do take the least amount of energy possible. But that is an area we're trying to study to what can we do to make some improvements there.
Yeah, we've looked at a control system that would control all of them, and like Dr. Taylor said, when we've had a power outage, it throws that control system out of whack, and sometimes lights will come on then when they're not supposed to. And so we're trying to work on that. We know that's an area that we can improve on, and our maintenance department's looking at that and working with some vendors to help fix that situation.
Great question.
We have another question about curriculum at the elementary level, but Dr. Simmers is not here. She's out sick today, so we'll have to put a pin in that one.
Yeah, we'll save that and talk to her when she's back and see if we can't respond then.
Well, while we have other questions come in, do you want to advance a slide and we'll talk about the next question?
Sure. Our next one is going to be Wednesday, October 8th. Again, the location's to be determined. We've sent out some feelers to a couple local places that would be willing to host us. We're just waiting for them to get back to us, and hopefully we'll have something here pretty soon to be able to let everybody know. I would remind you that we have a board meeting on the 21st of August, and then again on September, not 15th. The September board meeting, because we have a Good for the Grove that day as well. So in September, so more opportunities to come talk, come learn about what we're doing at the school corporation. So board meeting in August, September we have a board meeting and a Good for the Grove, and then October we'll have another coffee chat. So we're trying to be out there and be able to answer the questions, and we'll start our PTO visits, I think, coming up. We'll go out and talk to our PTOs and share more information, some of the same stuff that you've seen here today, but some of it'll be new. We're gonna try to be real transparent with what we're doing as a school corporation.
So another question, what can families do to help the district?
I would say attendance, be involved in schools. There's a ton of research that shows the more families are involved in their child's education, the better they are. So come to back to school night, come to meet the teacher, volunteer in the classroom. But I think for me, I would say really attendance. It needs to be important for the families. It can be really important for the school corporation, but until it's important for the families, then we're not going to be able to change a whole lot. And it's our job to make the education interesting and fun, and for our students to want to come as well. But I think support your teachers, volunteer in the building, come to back to school night, meet the teacher night. All of those things, those are probably our best requests for us.
Yep. Another question about putting flashing lights or adding some more signs to school zones to make people aware of those speed limits. That's not something we control.
So we work with the Johnson County Highway Department because all of our roads are maintained by them, and they have to be willing to do that. And we've pointed out some areas that I think Sugar Grove is probably an area where we see that a lot. And now that we've seen what they're going to do, if everybody's not seen that, they're going to widen Smith Valley Road and put a median down the middle of that. And so that'll change traffic patterns through there. And then hopefully put a couple of roundabouts at each end of really Sugar Grove. Will slow that down. But we watch that and monitor that, and our police department are out, and we've made requests to the county highway department, and they'll come out and study it and look at it. So if you have a school in particular where you think, feel free to let us know, and we'll make sure the police department looks at it and then confers with the Johnson County Highway Department.
So we have another question about addressing the issue of hiring and keeping good teachers, which is always a top priority for us. This person mentions that we have a few teachers in our elementaries that are on emergency licenses or even permanent subs. Kaylee, want to talk about that one?
Absolutely. So I think I'll first say we know education is tough right now. Absolutely. We've seen that as a pattern the last several years. While we have had some of our teachers resign, many teachers retire, I do want to share that our retention rate is still 91%, and the state average is actually 80%. So we're above that average. We want to continue to retain as many of our teachers as possible, but when we are looking to recruit and then keep those teachers here that we have recruited in our buildings, we're looking at supporting them in a multitude of ways. I know Dr. Long or Dr. Taylor talked a little bit about funding and looking what we can do in terms of compensation for our teachers, but we find other ways to support them here within our buildings as well. Emergency licensures was mentioned. That could be somebody who is just waiting to receive their results from their praxis exams. So there are several exams that people have to take when they graduate their programs, but we're able to get them in and get them into our buildings while they're awaiting that passing rate. We typically will approve an emergency license 1 or 2 times, but we see our folks being able to get those full licensures within the 1st or 2nd year of graduating from their coursework. With education being so hard right now to find teachers, we are seeing people who go into transition to teaching programs. So those are people who have their bachelor's degrees in other areas, but want to come into the field. So those are also people who are having to get those emergency licensures. So they're currently going through an Indiana approved transition to teach program. Those are typically about an 18-month-long program, but we assign them mentors here through the district. They have great mentors through their universities. And we're, again, just trying to do the best that we can in collaborating with those programs while those people are on those licensures. And I think I answered those questions.
Fill rate. I mean, we may want to talk
getting
about
ready to
fill rate.
Yep. So one of the other things was that we have a permanent sub We have had to bring in some stand-in teachers. I think we have 2 of those right now in the district, but we hired 55 teachers throughout the summer. And so out of 57 postings, we hired 55 of those. And then 2 of those, you're right, are currently filled with extended subs. We still have those positions open that we're looking to fill with certified individuals, but we're really confident that the ones that we have in those classrooms right now are really great additions. And again, we're providing them support just as we would for anybody with that emergency licensure. Those individuals are currently in their coursework right now. It's just undergraduate, so they don't have that opportunity to get that emergency licensure because they don't have a bachelor's degree quite yet. They may have an associate's degree, and so we're just trying to finish that programming so that they can become a licensed teacher.
The next question we have is related to facility rental before school and the space that Honeygrove needs to accommodate all of our kids in the morning and moving some of those clubs out. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, I'll talk a little bit about it. We're required by law to have a before school and after school daycare provider or childcare provider. We contract with Honeygrove, have contracted with them for a while. They made a proposal to us several years ago to do that. So we're required to have some space, and part of our contract with them is to give them the space that they need for their children. That for our parents that sign up or our staff that signs up and uses them as well. And so I think we've not been accommodating them in the past. And they've tried to work around that, but we've seen an increase in our numbers for that are using Honeygrove. So we've needed to provide some other space for them. And we've asked some clubs to move their locations and to change around. Part of that, some of that has to do with our change in the schedule and when our clubs are meeting. But you know, we're required to provide before school and after school care. I don't know if you wanted to add more to that, either one of you, Dr. Taylor.
The only thing that I would say is that we do have an increase in enrollment at Honeygrove with the start time changes, but we also provide our teachers with free care on Tuesdays and Thursdays during that PLC and PD time, which increases those enrollment numbers a lot during those 2 days as well. So the spaces that we're looking at are like our gym space. That's our biggest space in most of our buildings. And so wanting to give our kids the opportunity to have access to physical activity before going into the school day. So we appreciate the extra clubs who have compromised with us and been collaborative and finding creative alternative options for them to find other locations within the building.
We've also been working to make sure that all of the people who are utilizing our buildings have certificates of insurance on file. We're following our school board policy. One of those policies relates to tutoring and whether or not certain clubs and things like that are eligible to meet those tutoring guidelines. And Kaylee can talk a little bit more about that. But that's part of the reason some of those clubs have been moved out of the morning slots.
Is there anything specific you wanted me to talk about?
Well, just, I don't think so. I mean, some of them just don't fit that tutoring.
Yep.
Guidelines, yeah.
Provide them access,
Policy.
yeah.
Yep, absolutely. They're operating more as a private entity, want to utilize our space to hold activity groups, agility groups, those types of things. And so it is for them to follow our facility rental guidelines, not following like our extracurricular activities and those types of things as a center growth function.
Right. Yeah, I don't see any more questions, so.
It's 8:59.
You're always welcome to email us. The easiest email is probably communications@centergrove.k12.in.us. I know that's really long, I apologize, but lots of information on our website. We have directories on our website as well where you can reach all of us, but you're welcome to always reach out and we will get those questions answered for you.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Guess it did go really, really fast. I know we provided a lot of information. As Ms. Conrad said, if you have any more questions or want to follow up, we'd be happy to try to answer them. So thanks, everybody. Have a great day.